The tension building in The Young and the Restless Friday's full episodes February 6, 2006, is no longer subtle or contained, and the coming days in Genoa City suggest a convergence of personal vulnerability, corporate instability, and long-simmering vendettas that are about to collide in spectacular fashion. At the center of it all stands Victor Newman, a man who may appear publicly diminished but whose instincts for timing, symbolism, and disruption remain as sharp as ever. Victor's plan to sabotage the anniversary celebration of Kane Ashby and Phyllis Summers is not merely an act of spite or wounded pride. It is a calculated message meant to remind everyone in the room that no celebration built on his perceived defeat is ever truly safe. The ceremony, intended to solidify Kane and Phyllis as the new stewards of Newman Enterprises and to project unity, success, and permanence, instead becomes the perfect stage for Victor to reassert psychological dominance. For Victor, dismantling their moment of triumph is as important as reclaiming power itself, because in his world legitimacy is not just earned through contracts and shares, but through fear, doubt, and erosion of confidence. As Victor prepares his disruption, ripples of unease spread across Genoa City, touching lives far removed from corporate boardrooms. Lauren Fenmore finds herself cautiously optimistic when she learns that Billy Abbott has finally spoken to his mother again, a fragile reconciliation that feels long overdue. Yet even this small relief is overshadowed by worry, as Lauren's concern for her sister deepens. Information from Snapper Foster confirms that Jill Abbott's heart has grown weaker, a revelation that reframes every recent decision Billy has made. His ambition, his recklessness, and his desperation suddenly take on a more human dimension, rooted not in ego alone but in fear of imminent loss. Lauren's quiet confession to Michael Baldwin that she wishes they lived closer underscores a recurring theme in Genoa City: distance, whether emotional or physical, always extracts a price. Billy himself is unraveling in plain sight, though few seem to grasp the depth of his internal collapse. At the GCC bar, alcohol becomes both refuge and accelerant as he leaves a message for Sally Spectra, a gesture that feels impulsive, nostalgic, and deeply lonely. When Jack Abbott walks in, the facade crumbles. Billy's admission that his mother's health is deteriorating strips away his bravado, revealing a son terrified by the prospect of losing the one constant anchor in his chaotic life. His quiet confession that he does not know how he would survive her death lands with devastating weight, forcing Jack to confront not just Jill's mortality but the fragile emotional state of his brother. Jack's shock is compounded by practical concern as he questions how Jill would react if she knew Billy had returned to the chancellorship without her knowledge or consent, suggesting that what Billy sees as necessity may be remembered as betrayal. Jack's warning that this could be a profound mistake is not delivered with judgment, but with the weary insight of someone who has seen ambition destroy families before. The conversation turns inevitably to leadership, loyalty, and trust, and it is here that the shadow of Victor Newman looms largest. When Billy asks whether Phyllis could truly do better at running Newman Enterprises, Jack's response is immediate and revealing. He does not name Kane, nor does he express faith in Phyllis's cunning. Instead, he declares that the only person he trusts to run the company is Nikki Newman. This statement is more than an opinion, it is an indictment of the current regime and an acknowledgement that moral authority, emotional intelligence, and institutional memory matter as much as strategic aggression. Nikki's absence from the center of power creates a vacuum that Victor, Kane, and Phyllis have all attempted to fill in different ways, but none with the same balance of strength and restraint. Elsewhere, Lauren's anxiety continues to build as she processes Jill's declining health and the broader implications for the Abbott family. Her discussion with Michael is interrupted by the arrival of Diane Jenkins, and the topic quickly shifts from personal grief to corporate schadenfreude. Diane's reaction to Victor losing Newman Enterprises is unapologetically cold, reflecting years of resentment and unresolved conflict. While Michael feels a pang of sympathy for his old friend, Diane insists that Victor is merely reaping what he has sown, framing his downfall as moral justice rather than strategic miscalculation. Lauren, surprisingly, aligns herself with Diane's view, warning Michael that Victor will exploit every emotional and legal avenue available to him to regain control, including manipulating those who still feel loyalty or guilt toward him. Her certainty that Victor will attempt to use Michael as a pawn is not paranoia but experience, and it underscores how deeply Victor's influence has penetrated every corner of their lives. When Billy joins the conversation, Lauren's relief at his renewed communication with Jill is genuine, but it is quickly tempered by confusion. She finds it strange, almost alarming, that Jill remains unaware of Newman Enterprises changing hands, a detail that suggests secrets are being kept not out of malice but convenience. In Genoa City, however, convenience has a habit of metastasizing into catastrophe. Jill's ignorance becomes a ticking clock, one that threatens to explode emotionally just as Victor prepares to detonate Kane and Phyllis's carefully curated celebration. The irony is unmistakable. While one family braces for the loss of a matriarch, another prepares to toast a victory built on unstable ground. Amid all this, Victor's disappointment simmers quietly, not as despair but as irritation at having to wait. His frustration is not with defeat itself, but with the temporary disorder it has introduced into his world. Meanwhile, Nikki, alongside Chelsea Lawson, turns her attention to Adam Newman, whose loyalties and motives remain perpetually suspect. Their questioning of Adam is less about accusation and more about triangulation, an attempt to understand where he stands as alliances shift and Victor's shadow looms larger. Adam, accustomed to living in moral gray zones, finds himself once again under scrutiny. Caught between his father's legacy and the possibility of forging a path that does not inevitably lead back to betrayal. As the anniversary celebration approaches, the narrative threads converge with ominous inevitability. Kane and Phyllis, buoyed by public validation and unaware of the silent currents undermining them, prepare to declare permanence in a world that thrives on impermanence. Victor, armed with patience and a profound understanding of human weakness, prepares to strike not at their finances but at their sense of security. Billy teeters on the edge of emotional collapse, Jack braces for fallout, Lauren and Michael navigate loyalty and caution, and Nikki positions herself at the crossroads of conscience and power. In true Genoa City fashion, what begins as a celebration will almost certainly end as a reckoning, one that exposes not just who holds power, but who truly understands its cost. The emotional and strategic fault lines running through Genoa City continue to widen as private confrontations expose just how fractured trust has become, even among those who claim to stand on the same side. Back at the Abbott home, Diane Jenkins retreats into what she assumes will be the safety of her marriage, only to find that certainty remains elusive even there. Her argument with Jack Abbott is not loud or theatrical, but sharp with accumulated history, and resolved resentment, and fundamentally different worldviews. Diane challenges Jack's instinctive trust in Michael Baldwin, insisting that Michael's long-standing loyalty to Victor Newman permanently compromises his judgment, whereas Nikki Newman, despite her emotional entanglement with Victor, has demonstrated a clearer moral compass and a greater willingness to draw lines she will not cross. Jack pushes back, arguing that Nikki's proximity to Victor makes her vulnerable to manipulation, while Michael's legal mind and history of opposing Victor when necessary make him more reliable in moments of crisis. The debate is not about who is objectively right, but about which kind of risk is more tolerable, emotional loyalty or strategic blindness. In the end, neither is willing to fully concede, and the conversation settles into an uneasy truce as they acknowledge that trust in Genoa City is never absolute, only conditional. When Jack finally states that there is at least one truth they can agree on, his words carry the weight of long-delayed reckoning as he tells Diane that Victor is finally receiving exactly what he deserves. It is not triumph in his voice, but grim acceptance, the recognition that consequences, once delayed for decades, are now arriving with methodical precision. While the Abbott household wrestles with philosophical certainty, the Newman Ranch becomes the epicenter of something far more dangerous. Chelsea Lawson arrives not with hesitation but with resolve, determined to confront Victor Newman before events spiral beyond repair. She admits without deflection that she pressured Adam Newman into revealing his plan, acknowledging that secrecy has a way of rotting from the inside when fear replaces trust. Chelsea's confrontation is not accusatory at first, but deeply uneasy, as she questions whether what Victor has set in motion can be justified by any endgame, no matter how strategic. When she voices her concern that the only way such a plan could realistically succeed is through an actual kidnapping, the room shifts, the implication hanging heavy and unspoken. Her insistence that even Nikki has serious reservations about this approach cuts deeper than she anticipates. Because it pierces the illusion Victor has carefully constructed that he alone controls the flow of information. Victor's anger ignites not at the accusation itself, but at the revelation that Nikki is aware of details he believed contained. Interpreting it as yet another fracture in a system he demands absolute obedience from, Chelsea attempts to temper his fury by explaining that Nikki does not merely object, but has proposed an alternative, something more controlled, more measured, perhaps even more humane. Yet before she can elaborate, the door opens and Nikki herself enters, her presence immediately recalibrating the balance of power in the room. Nikki dismisses the importance of her idea altogether, stating with quiet finality that it no longer matters because Victor has already moved forward with his plan. Her question, directed squarely at him, slices through the tension with devastating clarity as she demands to know what he has done with Lily Winters and the twins. The specificity of her words confirms the worst fears Chelsea has been circling, transforming theoretical danger into immediate threat. When Adam appears moments later, aligning himself with Nikki's demand for answers, the confrontation evolves from private concern into familial indictment. A rare moment where Victor stands surrounded by those closest to him, all questioning not his intelligence, but his humanity. Victor's response is chilling not because of what he says, but because of what he refuses to say. He makes it clear that he will explain himself to no one, neither wife nor son, asserting that authority, once challenged, must be reestablished through silence as much as force. His disappointment in Adam for speaking too freely is delivered not as anger, but as cold judgment, a reminder that in Victor's world, loyalty is measured by restraint, not righteousness. When he turns and walks away, the gesture feels less like retreat and more like declaration, signaling that whatever he has set in motion is already beyond reversal. The aftermath leaves Chelsea shaken, Nikki grimly resolute, and Adam caught once again between the instinct to protect others and the lifelong conditioning to protect his father's empire. Together, these parallel confrontations underscore a singular truth taking shape across Genoa City. The battle lines are no longer drawn solely between rivals, but within families, marriages, and alliances once thought unbreakable. Diane and Jack's philosophical divide mirrors Chelsea and Nikki's moral alarm, while Victor's unwavering refusal to justify his actions confirms that this is no longer a game of corporate chess but a test of ethical limits. As Victor prepares to disrupt Kane and Phyllis's celebration and consolidate his unseen maneuvers, those around him are forced to confront a haunting realization that victory, when achieved without consent or conscience, may ultimately leave no one unscathed. The atmosphere inside the Newman Ranch remains heavy long after Victor storms out, his silence leaving behind more questions than answers. Chelsea Lawson refuses to let that silence be the final word. She insists that if they can determine how far Victor's plan has already progressed, there may still be time to intervene, to disrupt whatever machinery he has set in motion before irreversible damage is done. Her urgency is not rooted in strategy alone but in fear, the recognition that once Victor commits to a course of action, he rarely abandons it without extracting a price. Adam Newman, however, cuts through the hope with brutal realism. He points out that Victor has clearly moved beyond planning and into execution, and that the most likely leverage at this stage is not money or influence, but people. The possibility that Victor is already using Kane Ashby's family as bargaining chips transforms abstract dread into immediate moral crisis. Nikki Newman's apology is quiet and sincere, an acknowledgement that even with her attempts to temper Victor's excesses, she has failed to stop him from crossing a line she herself cannot defend. Adam urges Nikki to believe that Lily Winters will understand the complexities involved, that Lily has survived Victor's manipulations before and may once again find the strength to endure. Yet Nikki's response reveals the deeper fracture within this family, as she questions whether Adam would have revealed any part of the plan at all if Chelsea had not forced the truth out of him. Her question lingers uncomfortably, exposing the fragile ethics of selective honesty that have long governed the Newman household. Chelsea, unwilling to be cast as either villain or savior, admits that she too wants an answer, not out of accusation but clarity. In that moment, All three are united not by loyalty to Victor or the empire he built, but by a shared fear that they may already be too late to stop what he has unleashed. Across town at Newman Enterprises, ignorance of this looming danger allows a very different mood to take hold. Phyllis Summers and Kane step into Victor's former office, the space that once radiated dominance and intimidation now feeling strangely hollow. Phyllis remarks on the absence of Victor's oversized portrait and the ego that once consumed every corner, framing the change as liberation rather than loss. Kane, emboldened by his new authority, declares that there are no limits anymore, that they are finally free to redefine what this company represents. Phyllis, half joking and half provocative, suggests renaming the corporation entirely, tossing out Ashby Summers as a symbolic declaration that the old guard has been permanently displaced. Whether it becomes Enterprises, Incorporated, or Limited matters less to her than the act itself, the public erasure of a legacy that once excluded and belittled her. Kane's response is swift and dismissive, grounding her ambition with pragmatic restraint. He makes it clear that none of what she is proposing will happen, rejecting the idea with a sharp analogy that compares it to renaming Coca-Cola after himself. An act so absurd it would undermine the brand's very foundation. To Kane, power is not about rewriting names but controlling structures, and he believes that legitimacy comes from continuity rather than provocation. Phyllis, however, reframes her suggestion as something more personal, a symbolic refusal to remain silent or grateful in the face of those who have always underestimated her. Kane reassures her that the people who matter most already know her influence, that she does not need a nameplate to validate her role. His confidence borders on complacency as he insists that they now hold the reins, that control is firmly in their hands and Victor's era is definitively over. That illusion shatters the moment Victor Newman walks in. His presence alone recalibrates the room, stripping away bravado and replacing it with instinctive caution. Victor's warning to Kane is delivered without theatrics, a simple assertion that he should not be so confident in his newfound power. When Victor asks to speak with Kane alone, the request feels less like negotiation and more like summons. Once isolated, Victor reveals the true nature of his strategy, offering not reconciliation but ultimatum. He proposes a deal that redefines cruelty as pragmatism, demanding that Kane sign Newman Enterprises back over to him in exchange for a future where Kane will never see his family again. It is a threat disguised as agreement, leveraging love as currency and isolation as punishment. The weight of Victor's words forces Kane into an impossible position, one that exposes the true cost of ambition. To refuse is to risk his family's safety and well-being, to comply is to surrender everything he has fought to claim. Victor frames the choice with chilling certainty, as if the outcome is inevitable regardless of Kane's decision. Outside that office, Phyllis remains unaware of the magnitude of what is unfolding, still believing that control equates to security. Meanwhile, at the ranch, Nikki, Adam, and Chelsea wrestle with guilt and fear, sensing that Victor's endgame is accelerating beyond their reach. As these parallel crises converge, Genoa City stands on the brink of yet another reckoning. Trust erodes not only between enemies but within families, and power reveals itself as a force that consumes rather than sustains. Victor's return is no longer a question of if, but how, and the terms under which it will occur promise consequences that extend far beyond boardrooms and balance sheets. Whether Kane chooses defiance or sacrifice remains uncertain, but one truth is undeniable. In Victor Newman's world, every victory demands a loss, and the price is always paid in human cost.